Welcome everyone. My name is Alicia Phillips. I am the Student Center Associate Director on the Portsmouth campus, and welcome to our First Fridays event. This is our April edition of First Fridays. And with our April edition, we align it with the Literary Festival and the distribution of the new edition or the new issue of the ChannelMarker. And with that, we are featuring you, those who have been published in the ChannelMarker and for this particular event. We have 7 individuals who have registered to read, and we're really excited to hear from you.
Okay, can you go ahead with the introduction?
I'm sorry?
Can you go ahead with my introduction?
Wonderful. You're ready to go, huh, Joey?
Okay.
All right.
Hello, everyone. My name is Matthew Tyler, though I go by Joey. I enjoy reading, playing video games, drawing, working with clay, and most of all, writing. Writing for me is just a hobby and a stress reliever. As a college student, stress is a given. My favorite genres to write are science fiction, fantasy, and on occasion, poetry. I hope you all enjoy what I have for today. My first piece is the Sestina poem, The Calamity. The Calamity. The life-giving sword panned on the ground in the rainfall. The battle's end, the phoenix will never rise. The last hope stolen by the blind side. The master plan of darkness intentions the blind side. Fate of all rested on the sword. The outstretched hand of hope, rainfall, aiming to the never-coming rise, the end, the imminent end, the never-ending strategic blind, causing both sides to support or oppose the phoenix's rise. The life-giving blade, now a death sword, the phoenix's body turned to flaming rainfall, hope, the absence of hope characterizing the end. Talents and flames caused by Phoenix's rainfall, the path to salvation thrown to the side. Justice's sword, sniped by the failed rise. The life-giving blade key to the rise, and the God Star, the blaze way to bring in hope. They the Phoenix, now the dead sword, years after the deadly battle that drove the end. They're meant to receive fate's eye blind, fatal fall. The cruel fate where death's blade now spreads the phoenix's burning rainfall. Rise, blindside, hope, the end, omen to bring light to darkness but birth the dead sword. The sword, the rainfall, sees a world of thought and hope. And that's it for that.
That's beautiful, Joey. Thank you. Is there anything that you would like to share with us with regards to your inspiration for that piece and your process? For what class did you write that? Or did you write it for a class, or was it for your own personal edification?
I wrote it for creative writing, and about it was kind of an off day where it's just kind of where it's just kind of some stuff like prompts, that kind of thing. And I wrote it like in one class session pretty much. And this, as just inspiration, it was Sesinas are typically love poems, like Shakespeare type stuff. Mm-hmm. So what I did, I wanted to take a spin on it for like a fantasy angle, which I did.
Wonderful. Did you have another piece that you wanted to read?
I do have 2 more actually, but I can hold off with them and let other people go first if they wish.
Well, what we decided to do so that we'd maintain some order is to have each individual, as they're listed on the presentation schedule, to go ahead and read all of their pieces. And in between, if you'd like to share a little bit about your inspiration, the motivation, some content around how you developed the piece.
Sure. Let me go ahead and get the other ones up.
Okay.
Yep, and this audition for adult type fable, which a type of fable went over in creative writing class. That's more that hits on like more adult topics. This is audition before I get to read it.
Okay.
Felix lay down on a log, tail shaking, as he was unable to move due to pain. The fox, which had once been a typical trickster, was unable to be that anymore. Felix's body, gone from being unable to eat in his eyes, tired from being unable to rest, were putting all the animals at unease. I scrolled shouted at Felix. What's wrong? Out of tricks? And laughed. The fox had no response. Let's take back all the fox took from us. Following the suggestion, the animals pushed Felix off the log and took all the things Felix had taken from them by past friends shoved inside of it. The forest creatures dispersed and left Felix on the ground, alone. Hours passed, and as night fell, Felix had managed to move himself to a soft patch of grass. William, a wolf who was nearby, took notice. Felix, what's wrong? Felix sighed. I don't know. My body hurts. I don't have an appetite. I'm nearing my time, and I pushed everyone away with my tricks in the past. I can feel it. William shook his head. That'll help. I will stay. Felix managed a small smile. Thank you. As dawn approached the next day, Felix's time had ended. The animals had at once jumped for a chance to pay back at Felix, pretended to hold sad expressions on their faces. William, who had stayed true to his word and remained with Felix, turned to the other animals. Get lost. You shoved Felix to the ground despite his pain, and everything had left. You'll deserve to be here. And that's all for that.
Mhm.
Thank you, Joey. That's beautiful. I want to make a point to everyone that if you'd like to ask questions of the readers about their works, that you may insert those questions into our chat feature, and we'll read them. Joey, did you want to tell us anything about that particular piece and how it was developed?
Well, yes. The pieces kind of come from like a personal event in my life where my sister took her own life because she had this really bad ailment called EDS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and just it couldn't be cured. Doctors don't believe it existed, so they weren't trying to cure it, and just it was one of those rare diseases. And in that funeral, there were a whole bunch of people saying, oh, we cared about Madin, let's show up, despite the fact they never showed up. This piece was kind of a way of venting that anger out in a positive manner.
Thank you so much for sharing such a personal speech and then sharing with us your personal story about it.
No problem.
And you have one more piece for us, is that correct?
That is correct. I'll get it up real quick.
So while you're doing that, I want to make a point to make everyone aware that the submissions are open, I think, year-round now. And the form, I have included the link to the form in our chat feature. And it's open to all students. So that was one of the questions that I was asking about, making sure that students know that, that this publication exists, and that there's accessibility to having the opportunity to publish within the ChannelMarker.
Is that all for your announcement?
Yes, go ahead, Joey.
Okay. Taking advantage of me. I feel the pressure in my circuits as a multitude of messages run through me. The spam on my screen as it's forced to light up. Extending my life of suffering. And the device that never sleeps, always on 24/7. Humanity can't seem to live without me, which I find depressing. I'm the killer of many social interactions, while in some cases I can enable them. This many people sit in the same area texting each other instead of normal conversing. We wouldn't give to be shut off for a day. I hold many things and functions that on an unrivaled scale and shape, with such convenient size to bother with waiting until they get to the computer through internet surfing. Apps galore, and I started to lose myself each time a new application fills my memory. and simply a tool, nothing more, corrupted against its will. I was meant to humanity's service, but I was self-help cause it sinned.
Mm.
As no one tries to test the contact, I take my chance. He has no charger on him, so drop down to 20%. I can see disgust in his face as he calls out to anyone nearby for a charger. Time goes on, now at a 1% charge, but find the rest for a while. I feel myself jet back up to 90% to 15. I wanted to help Handy grow, and he took advantage of me. And that's all my pieces.
Thank you so much for being this first reader today, Joey, and for sharing so much of yourself in your writing. Professor Campbell made a note that the fable genre is one that's not published that often in the Channel Marker. So thank you for that contribution.
You're welcome.
All right. Aryeh Litt is a dual enrolled student. You have the floor.
Hello, I'm Aryeh Litt. As you said, I'm a dual enrolled student. I'm in high school, and last semester, this is my second semester at TCC. Last semester, I took a creative writing course, and my professor told me about the channel markers, so I submitted a spoken word piece that I did for that. And I'm not sure how to use the share screen thing. Do I just press that button and it shares the screen?
You don't have to share your piece on the screen, but if you would like to, yes, that's where you do it.
Okay, I'm gonna try it. Is that visible?
It is. Good job.
All right, gotta find mine. Somewhere around here. Yep, this is it. Okay, so this piece is it's a true story. I have a rare connective tissue disorder. It's actually the same one that Joey just mentioned, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, EDS. So whenever I walk long distances, or have to stand for a long period of time, I have to wear braces on most of my joints because otherwise they'll dislocate or do other weird stuff. So this is one of the funnier experiences that happened to me because people don't really know how to react when they see them, and it's always interesting. This was one of the funniest. Should I begin?
Yes.
All right. If you want to see some of the tightest security in the world, go to an airport. You have to stand in a long, twisting line that seems to go on forever, full of bored people, frustrated from waiting in the line for so long. Then you have to get your ID cleared by a TSA agent who clearly needs more coffee. This part is always fun for me because they never believe that my name is actually Litt. After that, you have to have your carry-on bags checked, so you put them on a conveyor belt made of steel rollers and grease stains. To then ensure that you don't carry anything dangerous onto the plane, like 4 ounces of toothpaste or a belt, you have to step through a metal detector, either a thin doorway that flashes red whether you have anything in your pockets or not, or a giant cylinder that looks like a time machine and spins around you until you're dizzy. I usually have to explain to the TSA that I wear metal braces for my joints and they set off the machine, and usually that's fine. But one time it wasn't. I was approached by a guard who was the very model of security. Tall, broad, shiny badge flashing on his shoulder, his crisp uniform perfectly highlighting his well-muscled arms. This wasn't the kind of guy you mess around with. I knew there was going to be a problem from the start when he asked me to remove my tzitzis, a religious garment that Jewish people wear. An airline officer cannot ask someone to do that, even if it looks suspicious. He told me to step through the metal detector, the time machine-looking one, and as always, it started beeping. I started to explain that I have a medical problem and the braces are metal, but he wasn't listening. He felt the braces and gasped rather comically. "Oh, that's not okay." I tried explaining the problem to him, but he was having none of it. "This is completely unacceptable. You'll have to remove these." "I can't, sir. I need them to walk." "Well, I can't let you pass this point with them on. It's a security risk." To my annoyance, he then proceeded to perform a special search in front of the entire airport. He, of course, immediately found my back brace. "Oh, that's not okay." "Sir, our back braces against airline regulations? No, they're not, but this is suspicious. You could be hiding something in there. What are you hiding? I'm not hiding anything, sir. I just want to get to my flight. If that's the case, then what is that? That's my knee, sir. I'll be the judge of that. This went on and on, back and forth until I'd had enough and offered to, in a private room, show him the braces. He agreed, and we headed for the private screening room, really a glorified cell with slate gray cement walls and no windows. Before we got there, he noticed my bag left on the conveyor belt and immediately confiscated it, claiming it needed to be manually searched. He emptied the contents of my bag onto the table and rifled through it, muttering to himself, "This is not okay. No, sir, not okay at all." He finished his search and turned around, his arm muscles rippling. "This is not looking good for you, young man. Not good at all. I'm going to need to see those braces." He then did the most thorough search I've ever seen someone do on anyone, and I've seen police arresting real criminals before. When he was done, he glared at me and said, "Wait here." He left the room and slammed the door behind him. I have no idea how long I was waiting there, but when he came back, he said he would let me go this time. I thanked him at length for helping to keep us safe. In response, he straightened his badge and nodded proudly. He then left the room, leaving me to clean up my belongings and run after my flight before it left without me. So, yeah, security's pretty tight at airport. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much,
Wow.
Aryeh. I'm just thinking how rich this experience has already been with that first series of readings from Joey, and now the connection with you and having EDS. I can only imagine what you felt in that experience.
At the time, it was honestly a mix of frustration and trying not to laugh because the guy was literally doing that very comical gasp every single time.
All right. Aryeh, that was your only piece.
That was my only piece.
Please share more. I love your writing.
Thank you.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about some of your career interests?
I don't have a particular career that I know that I want to do. I have an interest in psychology. I have an interest in writing professionally, and I have an interest in debate. But I'm not 100% sure how it's going to play out. I haven't chosen a major, so we'll see what happens.
All right. Well, keep up the writing, Aryeh. It's lovely, and it's an opportunity to expose the world to maybe something they're not really aware of, and a condition that they don't really understand. And as we heard from Joey earlier, how impactful that can be when people don't understand or are not familiar with things.
Yes, I'll just say the EDS is variable conditions. There are some people like Aryeh who can function relatively okay with it, but kids like my sister, she was basically like with the kind of body of an old person instead of a young person because she couldn't really do anything, get out of bed all the time. But so yeah, just kind of varying cases pretty much, even the worsen things.
Yeah, it's something that people tell me a lot. They say, is it like when they see me getting up from a chair or walking up a flight of stairs or something, people will say like, "Oh, you're an old man," which I usually try to put some humorous spin on, but people will.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for being with us. One of the things about First Friday event is that it helps people to feel that they are not alone. And so I'm so glad that all of you are with us today, sharing your original works and a little piece of your life. Next, we have Dorothy Shytles. Are you there? Are you ready? Do you need to flip the screen?
No, I'm a non-technology person. I keep all my poetry written down. So when I submitted it, I literally typed it up, and I haven't revisited that document for like months because I write everything in my notebook instead.
All right. Well, I'm kind of like that too.
So my name is Dorothy Shytles. I've been writing poetry since I was really young. I got the awesome chance to be published when I was in like the 4th grade because my elementary school had a writers club program. So a bunch of students got to submit all across the country, and that was really awesome. Now I look back at that poem and I cringe, but it's there. And I lean towards poetry, even though I also do creative writing narratives in that form because I'm also a songwriter and I play a couple instruments. So I lean toward poetry more strongly than I lean towards anything else. So I had 3 pieces published in the ChannelMarker this year. The first one is called The Jazz Singer, and then in parentheses it says 1927. I do not care for getting out of bed today. My bedroom exists in a silent film, blacks and whites and grays housed in a small rectangular screen. My eyes close, but sleep is far from home. Soundless symphonies coat the air, melodies that slip through ghostly fingers, right in front of me, but impossible to touch. I do not care for getting out of bed today, but the world speeds up and I get out of bed anyway. My second piece is called The Air is Cold and So Am I. I saw you the other day and I thought I would feel something. Maybe regret, maybe sadness, maybe anger. But instead I felt nothing, and somehow that seems much worse.
Mm.
Wow.
And then the third piece that I have published was my personal favorite, but I actually wrote it for one of my English professors last semester, and he did not like it at all. He thought it was not specific enough, and he often had that issue with my poetry that I submitted to him. He's the one that told me about ChannelMarker, but he also always had problems with my poetry about not being like specific enough, not mentioning people's names. But my point about my poetry is that it's not about those people, it's about how those people affected me. I don't want to give them sort of the power of like displaying because it's not about them. Which sounds rude, but it's like cathartic for me, so. This one is called The Street Smells Like Syrup. The city bustles, sharply, quickly, loudly, but all I can hear is your laughter, and all I can see is your smile. And in a crowd of thousands, it is only us.
Wow, I loved the title of that particular piece when I read it in the ChannelMarker.
Thank you. It comes from a memory that I hold kind of special to me when I took a really big, it was the first trip I ever took by myself. I was 17, I rode the train up to New York. So I like 8 hours there and I, was in the city sort of by myself. And it was a very amazing experience involving someone that I loved. And the specific street block that we were on smelled like pancakes and syrup. It was just like one of the very specific memories that I'm like, oh, this is weird. Okay.
Yeah, I love that. So you said you're a songwriter.
Yes, I am.
You play instruments?
Yes, I play the violin, the ukulele, the guitar, and the keyboard. And I'm working on percussion right now, but.
Wonderful. Did you want to share any of your music with us while we have you on the floor?
No. Sorry, I didn't prepare for that, so no thank you.
That's all right. Well, First Fridays is a regular series on the Portsmouth campus. When we're back in person, maybe we'll see you on campus.
Can we get her to read that last piece one more time?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Let me get back to it. Hold on. The city bustles, sharply, quickly, loudly, but all I can hear is your laughter, and all I can see is your smile. And in a crowd of thousands, it is only us.
I love that. So beautiful.
Yeah, Professor Campbell also makes note about just how beautiful it is, and the simile about syrup evokes amazing olfactory imagery, she says.
One of the things that I struggle with in creative writing is that I'm very bad at descriptions and detail because as a reader, those are the things that I skip over. Like I'll get 10 chapters into a book and then realize the character was described in chapter 2, but I've been picturing them completely wrong because I just skipped over the descriptions. So I like to try to get those senses in the shortest way possible because as a reader, I am the person who skips over super long descriptions. If you don't catch me in the first sentence, I'm skipping over the paragraphs of description.
Yeah, and I used to have a problem too where we did a dialogue, but not so much the descriptions. And just I took a while to unlearn not knowing how to do descriptions. And actually pretty good at it now, but it's just a learning curve for me too. And I do that for my short stories, which not match made in that of its usable length. but still, I'm hoping to share those next time if we get in, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I had 2 other pieces I submitted, and they were my favorite pieces that I submitted. They were sonnets, like written in iambic pentameter, modeled after Shakespearean sonnets, and neither of them got accepted. And I was like, 2 of these poems that got accepted, I wrote 5 minutes before the deadline, exposing myself here. And the sonnets I wrote, like I prepared for like a couple weeks before I submitted them because they take so long to get in that perfect iambic pentameter and rhyming the right way. And then neither of them got accepted. And I was like, I told my mom when I submitted, I was like, yeah, I really bet that one of the ones that get accepted is not going to be any of the sonnets.
Well, you have the opportunity to read the sonnets if you'd like. I'm very interested in hearing them.
Yeah, sure. So I have a couple, but my favorite is sonnet number 1, and I only submitted 2, so I'll just read the first one. Shall I compare thee to a moonlit night? Thou art more warm and more beautiful, though clouds do clog the beams shining so bright, and night fights the day it found unsuitable. Sometimes far too dim shines Pan's greatest love, and oft is Luna kept too quietly. While though they may be as fair as a dove, by chance or nature's choice glow rightfully. So night shan't fade, forever kept in dark. Apollo longs to touch, but rests over hill. To moonlit creeks and black forests we hark, to find valleys their light has yet to fill. When in sunrise, moonlight starts to fade, they kept their promise, and come what may stayed.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
You have this almost like Shakespearean way of speaking with that one. That really was really good. I like from the second you started that, I was like, whoa, like you know, that's so good, you know.
Thank you.
Yeah, the huge I read that my first thought was, did she? This sounds an awful lot like Shakespeare. I wasn't thinking it was like ripped off or anything, but I was just thinking this sounded like an awful lot like it.
The very first line is sort of, it started as a parallel to Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day? And I was like, okay, flipping that. And then the rest of it was mostly my own. And that was my very first sonnet I ever wrote. So I started with this basis of that concept because I wasn't sure how to write them. And then as I wrote more and more of them, I kind of got into my own space. But that one, the first line is definitely an exact perpendicular line from his most famous sonnet.
Okay.
All right. Well, was there anything else you'd like to share before we move on to the next reader?
No, thank you.
Thank you so much for participating and sharing with us your light. One thing that I thought about as you were talking about your the response from your professor and then the rejection for your preferred work to the ChannelMarker is that there is value in self-awareness and understanding your own voice. Though we are learning maybe from our instructors or from the world around us, being grounded in who we are is really important. All right, so we'll move forward to Charisse Minerva.
Hi, everybody. So honored to be here today to share my writing. I must say for ChannelMarker that I also want to say that the artwork, the cover, and everything is absolutely amazing, and so fortunate to have my work in there. And for the faces I recognize from class, shout out to everybody. So good to see you. I have 3 pieces. Only the last one is short. My background, I came to TCC in this go round, auditing creative writing. I've been writing my whole life, but just wrote. I just didn't think of it as anything. And then later on now, I think this was the current that underlies everything else. I'm also a musician, I'm a drummer. Alicia was asking me, was I gonna play my djembe today? But like Dorothy, I said, no, I wasn't prepared for that. I sing, I do spoken word, and I'm also a mindfulness trainer. So I teach people to contemplate and meditate and I think I'm able to bring all of it together somehow in this form. And it's just really interesting to something that I've just always done as a part of who I am, that I actually see it's good enough for others to want to read it. So my first piece is Circinus. And I'll explain Circinus Galaxy. At the end, I'll explain what the galaxy is, the real name. As the elevator doors opened, the young man walked in, wearing headphones, head bobbing, snapping his fingers. An older woman standing in the corner looked up as he entered the space and drew a dark blue portfolio tight to her chest. He moved to the opposite corner and slumped against the wall, mouthing a string of sounds, at once rhythmic, yet barely audible. At the end of his thick metal necklace hung a pendant shaped like a hand with fingers raised in the most impossible configuration, a symbol of the gangster sign language popular in his genre. His thick black leather jacket sported red designs on the chest pockets, green patches on the elbows, with bright yellow ribbing defining the seams. His man bun, crowned shaved sides with tracks cut by some tiny lawnmower into swirly linear configurations. He looked over at his elevator companion. Her pale lipstick just brought color to her somewhat narrow lips. She wore a hybrid hippie professional outfit, flared colorful skirt under a tailored jacket with a posture as erect as a broom. Her hair just jostled enough to look like planned chaos. Slowly, she ran long, slender fingers through gray speckled hair, transporting it back behind her ear. This movement revealed dangling glass earrings in the shape of peace symbols. Each guarded their elevator corners, releasing polarized scents, his pungent and strong, hers a mixture of flowers and herbs. The combination formed an unusual odor that pulled at each of their nostrils. Simultaneously, they both looked over at the designation floor lights. Only one floor was pushed, the Circinus Galaxy Productions. He responded with another rhythmic locution while she let out an audible sigh as she once more used her fingers to tuck her hair back behind her ears. Sullenly, the elevator lurched and then sat motionless. It had only moved one floor. The Circinus Galaxy production offices were in the penthouse. He commenced cussing with a string of profanities that would rival the savviest street order. She looked over at him, rolled her eyes, and stood even taller, more erect. He looked first at her, then at his phone, paused, and set off into a loud oratorical deluge of spoken words. He jerked away from the wall, quickly clutched the portfolio even closer while glancing at the walls, floors, and ceilings of the captive box. The elevator box served as a speaker reverberating his sounds. Its walls became a drum and his fist the mallet. Gradually, the volume of his diatribe lessened. He removed the beats from his ears, tapped repeatedly on his phone, sighed annoyingly, and bit by bit lowered his voice into rhythmic resonance. As his sounds became mumbles, he slumped to the floor, crossed his arms over his knees, and lowered his head. His voice dribbled off into silence. After a few minutes, she also sank to the floor even more slowly and carefully. She assumed the legs crossed W position, W-shaped lotus position, popular throughout the yoga world. She then raised one hand to rest on her chest, while the other rested on her knee, thumb pads gently touching the index finger on each hand, her eyes closed, and she breathed deeply for a few minutes. But instead of her breath subsiding, they gradually grew shorter and shorter, almost into a pant. She opened her eyes and emitted one long, deep exhale. She reached for her sapphire-colored portfolio and pulled out a few old and worn handwritten pages. She began reading them aloud softly. The more she read, the calmer, more melodic her voice became. She slowly glanced over in her direction, the glance becoming a gaze. Her words had a refrain. He mumbled, repeating it a couple of times. Then he added some of his own non-syllabic sounds. Turned her head sharply, glared, and then slowly a slight smile came over her face. He nodded again, repeating her words. She started over from the beginning, and at each refrain, he came in, retelling, adding, and turning their conversation into a call and response. She began to nod her head in rhythm with his, both in a verbal dance. The elevator started to move again. They showed no acknowledgement. When the bell rang, signaling their arrival at the production offices, they didn't move. Their impossible collaboration continued without a pause. The president of Circinus Galaxy Productions was at the reception desk directly across from the elevator bay, speaking with a client. He turned from his conversation, drawn by the sounds from the newly arrived elevator. He curiously peered into the performance space as the doors opened like curtains on a stage. So below here is this footnote about Circinus Galaxy, which is actually an existing galaxy. It's one of 12 large galaxies in the Council of Giants. It was not noticed until 1977 because it lies close to the plane of the Milky Way and is obscured by galactic dust. This galaxy is designated a Type II Seyfert, a class of mostly spiral galaxies that have compact centers and are believed to contain massive black holes. The galaxy is undergoing tumultuous changes as rings of gas are likely being ejected. So I like that title, yeah, because I felt like they were like in the center of a galaxy. They were a black hole of creativity, creating a whole new configuration.
Yes, I felt that. Can you talk to us a little bit about how your mindfulness work supports your writing?
Well, my mind, especially in my last piece, Curious, I think it shows a lot because it affects how I'm aware of my environment, whether that's my internal environment or whether that's watching what's going on around me. You could say that someone who's really trained in mindfulness would make a really good spy or a black ops because you develop this keen awareness of your senses. And once you do that as a writer, those are really good traits for writing because it brings you into this multi-sensory context of how you're writing and what you're trying to transmit to others. And that's what I loved about the creative writing class with Professor Allie, is that, you write something down and you think you've got it clear, but then you're in a room of people and they'll go, what you thought you had, they didn't have. Like my initial version of this piece, the idea of describing his necklace wasn't as clear as it is now. And I added that it was a gangster symbol. Before I didn't do that.
So I think this might be one of your classmates, but if you look in the comments, she's saying that she had the pleasure of hearing this before your changes and think you did a wonderful job, a great job in editing.
Oh, thank you.
Your voice.
Because that's just like the other Dorothy was saying, is being able to hear people's comments and let it transform your piece, but not enough that I lose my own intention.
That's what we were talking about earlier.
I
Yeah.
just thought your descriptions were so good. You paint such a wonderful picture, and you have a great voice for spoken word, to where you were expressive enough to keep me engaged, but I wasn't distracted by your voice. It was the perfect accompaniment to your piece.
Thank you so much. And that assignment was a foils. The assignment was to create two characters that were opposites of each other, but you had to reveal it through the story itself without them even, you couldn't explain anything. The reader had to get it out of the way you depicted it. So I had never tried that before. So I'm really happy that people could see it, and it seems like people like it a lot. Thank you.
Yeah. So Professor Campbell says that your piece presents amazing juxtaposition of macro and micro universes. The thoughtful details bring life to the story, or bring the story to life.
Yeah. So my next piece, like I said, I've written my whole life. And a lot of times what I've done with my writing, I would use it as an escape from dealing with the harshness of my own realities. So even now these days, I have to be careful. It's nice to bring it into the written world, but I have to be careful not to create an imaginative space in reality. And I have to watch that line in myself. So this next piece, Monsters, it was supposed to be flash fiction. And I remember that they said in flash fiction, you have to get the reader within the first sentence or first paragraph, because it's flash fiction, or you can't keep them. So I tried to hit in this piece, hit it with the ground running. And I wanted a piece that did a visceral reaction so that I could hold the reader. Let's see, did I find it yet? I'm almost there. Okay, it's called Monsters, Stars, and Hurricane Season. Looking back, I realized I was 8 the first time I saw my father punch slap my mother. That image is forever engraved in my mind. I guess it was around the same time that I also realized he was an alcoholic. Well, actually both of them were, but I believe she was more one by circumstance. As I grew older, I came to dread Fridays and long for Mondays. I walked home from school, each step adding anxiety as I approached my house. What antics, what drama would play out this weekend? It didn't matter if I snuck in regularly, monitoring how much of the malignant brown liquid was left, holding hopes that the nightmare would end once it was gone. Sometimes I even helped it along, pouring out hopefully indiscernible amounts, replacing it with water. Oh, how my heart would break when he'd walk in the front door, pulling from his inner coat pocket a whole new bottle, wrapped in a brown paper bag. Saturday was always the dead center of Hurricane Inebriado, except I don't ever remember there being an I. My mother had a beautiful vanity dresser, a large oval mirror with a lowered ledge held up on each side by 2 drawers where she kept her makeup and perfumes. It was cinnamon colored with an elegant inlaid wooden design. Had she asked him to move it? I don't really remember. What comes to mind is only the scene of him stumbling drunk, pushing that top-heavy object precariously across the room, ready to tilt over and fall. She needed it placed in the corner. We begged, negotiated, fussed, but he was too drunk to see the folly and the timing of her requests. I guess she was too. My older sisters tried their best, unsuccessfully, to talk him out of it, to convince him to simply wait until the morning to complete this task. Stumbling, lowered head bobbing, with his bottom lip hanging heavily, he insisted he could do it alone. Within 5 steps of his unbalanced gait, the vanity tilted, falling forward. As it hit the floor, the entire bottom half of the oval mirror shattered. Her beautiful vanity that I had sometimes sat in front of, pretending it was my own. The top half remains, with 2 or 3 long cracks running diagonally across its width, like facial scars. As my sisters moved to clean up the mess, they seemed at once angry, sad, relieved. Daddy, go sit down. We'll take care of this. No, he responded, using the classic drunken word drool. Your mother wants this moved, and I'm gonna do it. He shook their arms off and moved towards the vanity, now halfway to its place in the corner. Shards of glass glistened on the floor, crunching under their moving feet. My sisters yelled at me and my younger brother to stay back so that we wouldn't get cut. We all held our breath. It was like a slow motion horror movie. Was he the monster? Or maybe it was the mirror with its scarred face. He swayed and lunged, moving the vanity bit by bit. Daddy, please be careful, I started to cry. I guess I just couldn't handle the weight of the anxiety anymore. I stared as one of the cracks in the mirror's face began to open as the glass slid out of its oval nesting place on its way to the floor across the back of my father's right hand. Blood gushed onto the mirror, the wood, the floor, on his clothes. For a few moments, all seemed to stand still. Then he looked at his hand as if he was trying to bring it into focus. One of my sisters lurched for something to cover it, but before she did, I could see pieces of white meat peeking from beneath his very dark skin. I had the strangest thought. Even though we're Black, we've got white meat too. And everything sped up. Blood, rags, screams, and slurred speech. He didn't want to go to the hospital. It wasn't that bad. It's not that bad. Blood everywhere, everyone crying and screaming, the scarred vanity still not yet reaching its place in the corner. My older sister just gave that vanity to her daughter, who is moving into her own home with her 9-year-old son. It's all repaired now. The wood's been cleaned and polished, revealing all the details of the elegant inlay. The mirror is whole. Both my parents are gone too, and me and my siblings are now grandparents. My father had to have a couple of operations on that hand and never got its full use back. He did stop drinking though, before my mother passed. I admit, it is one beautiful piece of furniture, but when I look at it, I still see scars.
Wow.
Yes.
I really enjoyed the piece, although it was so hard for me to get through that one portion after the mirror fell, because I actually have a fear that I can faint from. So it's not your fault. It's not your fault that you read that I hadn't gotten through the whole night scene yet. So don't blame yourself for not knowing. But it was good. Just so hard for me to get through that part.
And explain why it was hard again. I'm sorry.
Well, I have a fear of blood that I can actually faint from.
Oh.
The conditional hemophobia. Like you said, it's not your fault. I hadn't gone through the whole magazine just yet, but just saying that for, I guess, future warning.
Yeah.
I actually read this piece last night when I got the email with the link. I was reading through it a little bit, and I just read through some of them that were near my own piece, and I read this one, and I remember thinking last night that this was one of the greatest pieces of writing I've ever read. It's seriously fantastic.
Wow.
Thank you so much. Thank you. My hope was to be able to have people in the space to actually feel the fear of that child and the anxiety and the confusion, all of that moment, that if I could actually, could I do that in writing?
It isn't the sort of situation that I can personally relate to, but you managed to get me into that mind space, and so that I could connect to it, even though I can't personally connect to it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would say you really invested people with your details. It's good.
Thank you.
And one thing for me, Minerva, is it really pulled me into the current moment where we're thinking about the children who are at home, and you talked about the anxiety of walking home.
Yes, I think about that now, the people that are in these environments that are not necessarily safe. And I see that, and I actually send prayers to those people. I also, people may not have this particular experience, but I think it is a universal experience of having that kind of fear. And that's what we do in writing and in movies and in songs and in poems as artists. We have this ability to help people go through it, but it's still a safe space because I know it's not me, but still I can feel it. And that's one of the gifts and challenges of being a writer, is to be able to. And so that means for me as a writer, I had to go into a very tender, soft space in my own life and to be able to articulate that. But in the process of it, there's a healing that goes on. That's a real gift for me. And I showed that piece to my family, my older sister, and she commented that she had completely blanked that incident out of her memory until I brought it back up. The sister who has the vanity. And she was like, I'm glad you did that, because I needed to visit that. And I needed to flush that from my system too.
One of my favorite parts about it was the surreal feeling that you managed to convey with the line, even though we're Black, we've got white meat too. Just that kind of out of body experience of surrealness in that moment. I really like that.
Thank you. Thank you.
And your shirt is meaningful as well today.
Oh, thank you. You noticed. I appreciate that.
Of course.
Because I think we're in a time where we really need to focus on hope. That is a battle. That is the war we face right now. It's finding hope in all of these places and finding creative ways to bring hope to ourselves, our families, our community, however we define community. So I did purposely, thank you so much for noticing.
Okay. You have one more piece?
Yes, I want, and this one's shorter. This is, and this is the one where I'd say that I really, you can see more clearly my mindfulness practice. One thing about practicing mindfulness is you get this deeper awareness of self. And a lot of people think mindfulness is just about being relaxed, but that is just not what it's about. It's about being aware. Whether you're angry, whether you're bored, whether you're relaxed, all of that, it's about being aware. And in that awareness, it allows you not to be as stressed out. At the same time, a byproduct of it is that you get a deeper sense of nature awareness. Somehow that happens. And you can also work at doing it, but everyone that I know that has really studied mindfulness, even if you live in the middle of an urban jungle,
right,
you find mindfulness. So my last piece is called Curious. Walking along the overgrown pond, weeping willows sway, touching the earth, while kissing water laden with lily pads. I hear a crow's cough faintly in the distance. The corner of my eye catches the dance of a leaf as it falls to the earth, a theory floating in the wind. In its nestling place, I notice a pink flower. It peeks beneath a moss-covered twig. The twig, now decayed, was once part of the grand oak guarding the path. This thing we call life, alive while dead, flows seamlessly in nature, yet we draw lines of demarcation, walls of definition. This is where it begins, this is where it ends. Yet nature seems to convey a different tale. I stretch my ears to listen to its story, like the crow's call in the wind. It reaches out from the distance, compelling me to ponder the paradox of now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you. This has just been such a rich experience. I'm thinking again about your mindfulness and how you were talking about how the closer we become to our nature, it's the byproduct is that we become closer to nature. That's the nature that's around us.
Yeah, because we are nature. We've just forgotten. And maybe what the contemplation does, it brings us more that there's no lines between us. We're all connected.
Exactly.
There are no lines of demarcation, even between life and death. And look, as we sit in that experience so profoundly right now, that to ground oneself, it allows to ground so that we won't be so buffeted by the tides.
And spaces like the one that we're currently in with the moment that we're sharing here together reminds us of that as well.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for your comments. I've been reading them in the chat.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Dominic, are you ready? Dominic Pistritto?
Yes, I am. I don't know how I'm going to follow up with that.
I guess it'd be impossible.
It's not.
I know. We need to do something else. Say both no.
Next time, Charisse, you have to go last. Sorry.
I feel bad. Don't get it.
Thank you guys. You make me feel good. But no, everyone's is good.
Well, let me go ahead and share my screen real quick. There we go. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, sweet. Don't mind my little Marvel theme background. So this one is kind of one that I got some inspiration for when I was driving home one night. It was during a really bad kind of storm, and granted, I shouldn't have been driving on the streets during a really bad kind of hurricane-esque, but there was no one else on the road, and the storm hadn't gotten that bad. And then the emergency alert system went off, and I was the only one on the road at like 1 o'clock in the morning. And it's really eerie when you hear that little ring go off, and you're the only one for miles, and it's just really creepy. And I kind of wanted to embody that kind of almost like fear with a robotic voice type thing. And I tried to see if I can, do something similar. So yeah, just, try to do something like that.
All right.
So I called this one, This Is Not a Test. This is the emergency alert broadcasting system. We interrupt this program by the request of the Federal Aviation Administration. An unidentified aircraft has been spotted over the city of Chesapeake at 7:56 a.m. Eastern Time. Chesapeake residents are heavily advised to vacate the area effective immediately. And Not yet known if this aircraft is hostile. More updates will come as more information becomes available. Please stay connected to any mode of radio broadcasting. This is the Emergency Alert Broadcasting System. We interrupt this program by the request of the United States government. Numerous more unidentified aircraft have entered Earth's atmosphere at approximately 11:34 p.m. Eastern Time in Los Angeles, California. Residents of Los Angeles are heavily advised to follow the following instructions to assure maximum safety. Turn off all electronics. Turn off household appliances. Close all windows and doors. Do not look out any windows. Do not open any doors. And do not go outdoors. Do not go outdoors if you hear suspicious activity. Please keep a battery-powered radio to ensure that you are connected to any further updates on the growing international threat. And the recommendation shows that you must take shelter at any local safety shelter and/or vault. This is the Emergency Alert Broadcasting System. We interrupt this program by the request of the United States government. The city of Los Angeles, California, has been decimated by forces beyond our control at approximately 6:23 p.m. Western Time. They are now continuing to Long Beach, California. The United States military is now seeking and developing any and all possible shelters that may be used to reduce chances of loss of life. They may be targeting large population zones and reducing the population. Shelters being constructed by the United States government are by the following locations, excluding Los Angeles, California, Southern New York, Lexington, Virginia, Jacksonville, Florida, Vancouver, Washington, and Savannah, Georgia. More shelters will be implemented as more information is updated. If you are not a legal resident of the following locations, please evacuate now. And if you are taking refuge already, please continue to stay in shelter until an all clear is given. This is the Emergency Alert Broadcasting System. We interrupt this program by the request of the United States government. The invasion of the United States continues, and all military action has been implemented, and numerous studies have been conducted on this unknown threat. High-frequency radio waves will be implemented to further test if the threat can be neutralized. And at the siren, turn the volume up on your radio as high as it can go and cover your ears to prevent potential hearing loss. At this time, do not go outside, lock your doors, turn off household appliances. Do not look out the windows. Do not respond to any noises outside, no matter how human they may sound. Do not investigate any strange lights or noises in your home. Do not look into any reflective material. Do not use any cellular devices. And most importantly, stay calm. This is not a test.
You went for the long invasion there.
Yeah, that one, at first I was thinking about, and keep in mind, this was before the whole COVID-19 thing broke out. So, that whole prospect of what would happen if, sorry about the stuttering too. For some reason my computer kind of went blurry there for a second because I'm sharing it. But yeah, that one was something that I tried to, kind of imitate and see how well that I can kind of do it. But I tried to make it kind of creepy near the end of it, kind of, be like, what would happen if kind of scenario. And so I hope you guys enjoyed it.
My favorite line, please be calm. This is not a test. Please remain calm. This is not a test. No way, dude.
Almost creepier that you're showing it from that perspective as like the emergency alert broadcasting system than it would be if you were talking about what people are actually experiencing. It's almost colder. I'd love to hear it read by someone with like a Siri-esque voice, like this is the emergency alert broadcasting system. Like just some sort of robotic, like you're not hearing other humans. I think that would be really cool, but it's definitely creepy. You hit the nail on the head.
I think that you, Dominic, have a very good voice.
I reload that piece. The last bit there made me think or when you first read that Great Writing Club, are these super aliens or something?
They sound
Yeah,
like they came from a quiet place. They use sound against them.
I haven't seen that, so you can't really compare that reference, but I can imagine the reference, but I can picture it from what you said.
Because I had tried to make it as, like, again, you know, keep in mind, this is before this whole thing. I saw a movie similar to that. I can't remember what the name of it was, but it had that kind of, like, it had like that, like, almost like impending doom. But then I kind of thought about, well, what would happen if we told the story through a completely non-biased point of view? Kind of like telling what is happening all the time. It's almost like third person, but with a reason. Like if third person had an actual voice in the real world, what would it, like, what exactly would it be?
Oh my, okay. Hold on 1 second. Nisha?
Yes.
We can hear you.
My bad.
That's okay.
But yeah, but I really hope that you guys enjoyed it. I want to read the one so that, you know, other people can read too. But yeah, I really hope that you guys enjoyed it. Again, sorry about the stuttering. The for some reason, again, like the wording kept kind of fading in and out for some odd reason. I have no idea. So yeah.
Well, Dominic, we do have time for you to read more. After you, there's only one other reader. So if you're interested in reading another piece, you may do so.
Well, I'm gonna
take it off the screen share this time so that it doesn't fade in and out and you're just reading.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, but as far as stuttering goes, I mean, I worry about too much. I mean, I have it worse as like a condition of having ticking and stuff like that. So I think you're fine as far as it goes.
Okay. But I'm gonna actually let the next person go. That way, you know, they have the time to do it too. And I would love to hear what more people have to say.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dominic.
Yeah, no problem.
So Maya Hunter-Holmes.
Hello. Hi, I'm Maya, obviously. I would like to apologize for the mess that is the room behind me. Our office isn't exactly the cleanest place in the world. And I wrote short stories, and that's all there is to it, really.
We're glad you're here, Maya.
I'm probably not going to screen share.
Okay.
Yeah, but
we're looking forward to hearing you.
And I'm going to do my best to go in the order that it was published in ChannelMarker. So,
however you'd like to read it is fine.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'll probably do chronological order of when I wrote it.
All right.
And blood is mentioned in both of these stories, but it's not in detail, so I hope it should be all right.
Thank you.
Yeah, it should be okay. As long as it's not in detail, it's like past mentioned, that's fine.
All right. So this first piece I wrote based off a prompt that Professor Allie gave me. It was describing the same scene from two different perspectives, one from someone who had just fallen in love and one from someone who had just committed a murder. And yeah. The moon shone off the gently rippling waters of the lake while the wind whistled through the woods behind me. I had come out here to grab something my friend had left behind earlier, something she'd forgotten while she was busy with whoever she was seeing now. I can't remember what she sent me to grab. It's not important to me anymore. When my friend had begged me to go, I had made a show of being inconvenienced, but now it just seems like destiny. The most beautiful woman I had ever seen was lounging on the largest boulder in the lake. She loosely held a fiddle braced against her shoulder. She had clearly stopped playing to look at me. I stared. What else could I do? She was a goddess, and I couldn't tear my eyes away. All I could see was her. She had begun to play again, a melody composed of wind and bird song, and in that instant I knew she was the only one for me. The urge to rush to her, to cradle her in my arms, to take her home and become more with her suddenly filled me. I rushed over to the dilapidated boathouse on the edge of the lake, flung the door open. The stench of mildew and rot filled the air, but that couldn't deter me from her. One lonely boat floated inside the graffiti-covered building. I untied it, ignoring the creaking protests of the floorboards, and rowed out to her, my love, my life, and she put down her fiddle and reached for me, and the moment she fell for me was her greatest mistake. I heard her blundering footfalls long before she arrived at my lake. I saw her face when she noticed me, resplendent against the backdrop of my watery domain. I knew the moment she fell and became mine. It was nothing for me to play a song of want, to entice her out to me. It was easy to echo the feelings stirring inside me. Of course, it wasn't the kind of want she expected. It was easy for me to reach out and grab her shoulders, and even easier to hold her under the water's surface until she stopped thrashing. It was easy to set aside my fiddle so that I could strip the flesh from her bones. It had been so long since I had fed. Her blood flowed out, staining the water around my rocky throne. I ate until I was sated, then reached toward the boat. I pulled it back to the boathouse and pushed it into its dock. I ran a hand over the boathouse's wall, remembering how bright and solid it was so many decades ago, back when food would come to me in droves. I suppose my appetite had something to do with its current state. I swam back to my boulder and scooped up my fiddle. I swung it back to my shoulder and glanced up at my eternal, unwilling audience. The moon stared back at me like a bulbous, pale eye, silently accusing me, but never acting on its judgment, never stopping me from taking those it oversees. I barked out a laugh and played a song of smug contentment.
Yes, thank you. You want to talk to us a little bit about your process with writing that?
So all the short stories that I wrote and submitted, they're all based on various mythological creatures, but they're generally a little more obscure as opposed to better known ones. I haven't written anything about dragons or unicorns of the sort. The creature in that story is what's known as a Fossegrim or a Nokken. It's from Scandinavian mythology, and it's a water spirit that plays the fiddle, and it's said to play beautifully, and if you give it meat like every Thursday or something, it'll teach you to play the fiddle. But I had read a book, I can't remember the name of it for the life of me, but it was a very good book, where a Fossegrim was one of the main antagonists, and it took on this more siren-like, luring people away and then feasting on their flesh type persona, and I really enjoyed the way that it was portrayed like that. So I decided to write one like that.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah, I think the kind of viewpoint is interesting because trying to take mythological creatures and write about them from a different point of view. I don't really write about mythological creatures. I write more science and fantasy type stuff. But it's so interesting, and I was able to follow the Parth Bud and all that because with Charisse's story, not trying to push any negative impact like that, but there's just so much going on was missing with the Fear of Blood going on. But in your case, I didn't really feel that because that was what was going on, and I was able to focus more in on that. But like I said, I'm not trying to push any ill intent anywhere, like, or preference or something like that, to just say my opinion on that.
Were you able to hear that, Maya?
I caught bits and pieces of it, yeah.
Are there any other questions about this or remarks about this particular piece for Maya? You can
I
go
loved
through
it.
this. Oh.
I loved it. And I loved the way you read it, which was really, yeah. And to Joey's point, that's the beauty of art, that, you know, things attach to different people, and that's the beauty of variation, and that's the beauty of ChannelMarker. As all these, so I guess I'll put spoiler alert or something on that story. But yes, Maya, I really enjoyed that a lot, and I remember that assignment. I had it too, so it's really interesting seeing how someone else developed that. I mean, you really caught me off guard when you did the switch. That was beautiful. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, I guess I'll read my other piece now. Okay. So I don't remember if this second one came from a prompt or if it was just something I felt like writing, but I feel like this one's a little more rhythmic. Not sure why, but yeah. She's always there when I walk down to the stream. I don't know her, but I always see her. Sometimes there'll be other women sitting with her. There might be the redhead in the long green dress, or the fiddle player who wiggles her fingers in flirty little waves at me. Mostly, though, she's alone by the stream. She's always just staring into the water. She sits on the bank, long white hair dipping into the swirling eddies. Her hair is always messy. It looks like someone cuts it with hedge clippers instead of scissors. She doesn't seem to care about the state of her hair, though. She never brushes it out of her face or lifts it from the water. Instead, it falls as it wills. Some of her hair is stained darker and clumped together. She wears an old dress the same color as her hair. The skirt and bodice are full of holes and the hems are frayed. If I look closely, I can see the last vestiges of embroidery and beadwork under the strange, dark stains. I try not to look too closely. I don't know why, but I feel like I shouldn't look at her. Her shoulders are always shaking like she's sobbing. It would be a picturesque scene, a woman crying on the bank of a stream, if it wasn't for everything else about her. Her knotted hair, her ancient dress, the large wicker basket that she keeps next to her. None of it seems right. Ravens sometimes surround her. I'm not sure what to make of that. I think she has laundry in her basket. One day, I saw her take out a shirt and plunge it into the stream. It had stains that looked like the one on her dress and in her hair. As she scrubbed vigorously at the shirt, the water flowing away from her was red. She cries harder when she's washing something. Today, I decided to take a different path down to the stream. I dared to walk in front of her. She looked up at me. Her eyes were red and brimming with unshed tears. I could see the path that the tears had taken down her face, shining with the light. We breathed in together, a single breath connecting us for an instant. And I knew what she was. I knew what she meant. She's wailing now. I think that's my shirt she's cleaning.
I really like that one.
Thank you.
I like that too. It was almost like a foreshadowing piece.
So the creature for that piece is the banshee, which is a little more well known. They are omens of death, typically death in battle. But what they would do is they would have a basket full of bloodied clothes belonging to the person that would die, and they'd sit by the riverbank and they'd clean the clothes and they would cry. And then if you saw one, you knew that you were going to die soon.
Well then. I really like the curious atmosphere that that this one had. I think that's my shirt she's cleaning. I think this. I think her basket is full of laundry. I really like the questioning and the thoughtfulness.
So which version of the Banshee is this? Are there multiple versions of Banshees in different myths or mythos, I guess it should say?
This is just kind of the death omen. She's not going to go and kill you, but seeing her will let you know that you're going to die.
I'm right, but I mean, like, don't different religions have different types of banshees, or is only just one religion that has banshee in it?
It's based on Celtic mythology.
Ah, okay. I thought it was something like that. I just couldn't put my finger on it. It was all very interesting.
I like Allie's comment, and I agree with that. You know, your stuff is so chilling, and you have this nice, sweet voice. And do you ever record? Do you record your storytelling?
No.
Because you might consider doing it, because that already is almost like an opposition, because you have this wonderful, soft, this melodic, sweet voice, and these characters doing like these ominous things. So it unnerves you immediately because you're caught off guard. I was
thinking that same thing, Minerva, when she was reading. Do you also draw?
Yeah, I draw.
I actually felt that somehow in the way you described things.
I've heard my stuff was actually draw as well, and you've been doing a little bit of stuff with clay, which I'm getting better at. Still trying to, learning curve kind of things. Oftentimes I have to draw my characters before I have to finish up the story, so I can picture them for next time or the story.
I actually have some other stories that I didn't submit to ChannelMarker that are also based on mythological creatures that, if you want, I could read them.
Certainly, Maya. The floor is yours.
Oh, cool. Let's do this one. Why not? Oh, that was loud. I love going out into the forest. The trees are tall, and sometimes I can find salamanders to scare Sissy with. Or I used to be able to scare her with them. Now Sissy is a teenager, and she's too grown up to go out into the woods with me, so I go by myself. Even though I love the salamanders and the tall leafy trees, they aren't my favorite things about the forest. My most favorite thing is the music. When I walk to the end of the furthest trail, I can hear it a little ways off into the trees. If I listen closely, I can hear ladies laughing over the sound of the flutes. Whenever I tell Mom about it, she chuckles and ruffles my hair like I'm still 5. When I tell Sissy, she frowns and tells me not to make up stories. Yesterday, I was stomping through the puddles left on the far trail by the thunderstorm. When I got to the place where the music was, it was louder than it had ever been before. I could almost hear words under the laughter and song. I wanted to go see, so I stepped off the path. Everything went silent. No more birds chirping, no more croaking frogs, no more flute music or laughter. It was scary hearing the words so quiet. I got goosebumps on my arms, and I was about to run back home when a voice called out, "Hello there, little one." The voice sort of sounded like my mother when she sees her friends' kids. "We're sorry we scared you by stopping the music, but we wanted to know if you'd come dance with us. My sisters and I have been watching you for a while, and we think you'd be an excellent dancer." I nodded excitedly and took a step closer. Dancing sounded super fun. But after another step, I paused. Mom was going to call me in for dinner soon, and she'd get mad if I didn't come. I told the voice that I wanted to dance, but I needed to go home. "Well then, why don't you come back tomorrow? It's a Saturday, so you don't have to go to school, and you can spend all day dancing with us." That sounded like a fantastic plan. I nodded again before waving and dashing back home. Mom was opening the door to call me as I ran up the porch. Dinner that night was green bean casserole. I hate green bean casserole, but I was so happy about dancing tomorrow that I ate it anyways, and Mom gave me extra dessert for eating all my food. Later, I could barely sleep, even after my favorite bedtime story, but I told myself that I couldn't dance if I was tired. This morning, I jumped out of bed and pulled on my prettiest dress. When I hurried downstairs, Sissy stopped me and asked what I thought I was doing. I told her I was going dancing with the ladies in the woods, and she frowned. She was about to say something when I pushed past her and rushed into the woods. Now, I'm standing by the path where the music is. "There you are, little one," the voice calls. "And to think, We were worried you wouldn't come. The voices of the other ladies agree, then laugh. Come dance, they shout, and I push the bushes. There's a clearing full of ladies in long green dresses, and every one of them has the most amazing red hair. Most of them are already dancing with each other, but one is waiting for me. She smiles and reaches for my hands. Looking around, I notice there are no musicians. The lady coos, "What a beautiful dress. Why, you're the prettiest one here." She brushes some hair out of my face and whirls me into the dance. Her green dress lifts when she spins. I look down at her feet to try and follow her steps. Her feet are hooves. I look back up at her face and notice that the teeth in her smile are too sharp.
Ooh. Ouch. Wow.
I think that's the most chilling of the ones you've read so far.
Yeah.
And I love the kind of enthusiasm with which you read the parts where they're describing how fun it's going to be to dance with them, and you kind of know what's coming, that they're not what they say they are.
So the creatures in that story are also from Celtic mythology, and I believe it's pronounced Beobanshi. They're kind of like vampire fairies. And what they do is they take the form of beautiful women in long green dresses, but they can be told apart because they have deer hooves for feet. And they lure hunters off their tracks, and once they catch you, they suck your blood and eat you and steal your soul.
Fun.
That's pretty extremely good. It's out the first part.
I love it. There was a comment for you a few comments ago. Let me see if I can find it. From Professor Campbell, just talking about how accessible, I can't find it now, but she was just saying how accessible the way you're writing mythology is for the reader.
Yeah. It's a couple up. It says sometimes mythology can be a bit overwhelming and obscure, but you make it accessible to the average reader.
It's like if Percy Jackson was hard.
I mean, yeah.
It's very good.
Thank you.
All right.
So is Dominic going to still read another piece?
Well, we actually have Allie. I don't know. Was Maya, were you going to read any other pieces?
I mean, I have one that's not spooky if you guys want to hear it.
We would love to hear it.
Okay. Let's see. Here we go. Oh yeah, this one's the long one. I only have vague memories of my great-grandmother. She lived out in Idaho, which is pretty much the middle of nowhere, so my family didn't visit her often. What I do remember of her is disjointed and odd. The shelves and tables in her house were always covered in cheap knickknacks, and she kept a fossil of a computer in the guest bedroom. Once, she taught me to play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star on her figurine-laden piano. Of course, my lack of memories obviously made me the prime candidate to go clear out her house after she passed. Dad mentioned some legal reason for it, but I was caught up in thinking of finally escaping my quiet apartment with its half-empty bed and pastel blue walls in the extra bedroom. So now I'm in the middle of Idaho with a car full of collapsed cardboard boxes and cleaning supplies, no way to access the internet, and a set of keys to a dead woman's home. Idaho in winter is frigid. I stare at my condensing breath for a moment, then shake my head and unlock the door. I flip the light switch just inside the door. Nothing happens. I flip the switch up and down a couple times. The lights stay off. After a quick call to the power company and the exchange of banking details, the lights, and more importantly, the heat, turn on. The house has even more figurines than I remember. Porcelain children with round red cheeks and empty smiles are crowded up to kittens and puppies with flocked fur. Everything is covered in a thick layer of dust, which makes sense, I suppose. Great-grandma had been in the hospital for a long time, The piano still dominates the living room, the ancient television tucked behind it like a shy child, and every vaguely flat surface is coated in dust and kitschy statuettes. The kitchen is connected to the living area and boasts just as much clutter. Newspapers and puzzle books are stacked precariously on the dinner table, and utensils are scattered over the dark counters. I stare at the main area for a while before sighing and pulling my coat back on. The door creaks as I head back out to my car to grab my supplies. Might as well start here. 3 days. For 3 days, I pack books and wrap figures in newspaper. I tape together boxes and dust shelves. I eat a lot of takeout and pizza. I pull down old photographs of smiling babies with a twinge in my heart. I sleep in the guest room under the watch of the outdated computer. I am alone, but at least it's a different loneliness from the one back home. It takes all of 3 days to pack up the kitchen and living room. I cover the furniture in dust cloths and mark it for removal. Once everything is gone, I move into my great-grandmother's room. I've never worked up the nerve to go in before, but I want to put the guest room off till the end, so this is the only other place to clear. The door swings open easily. In the center of the room is a 4-poster bed that looks like something out of the 1800s. A desk and dresser set is shoved against the wall where they're overshadowed by rickety shelves. The room is stacked full of more figurines. Every single one of them is shattered. Shards are laid out across the rug in strange, swirling patterns. I stare at it for a moment before uttering a quiet curse and going to grab a broom and trash bag. The broom is easy enough to find, but my little box of trash bags is empty. I huff and root through my supplies to see if they've fallen out. No bags. Maybe I moved them. I check inside the cabinets in the pantry, and they turn up empty. The coat closet is bare except for my puffy purple coat. The linen closet doesn't have any trash bags, but it does have a door to the basement in the back. I try the knob, find it locked. Weird. I search through the rest of the house. As I check the bedroom, I hear a soft knocking noise come from the hall. But this is an old house, so it's probably nothing. After practically turning the house upside down to no avail, I drive to the nearest store and pick up another box of trash bags. Once I get back, I start cleaning the shards with a vengeance. For my troubles, I end up getting cuts all over my hands. And since I have no Band-Aids, I just wash my hands and hope for the best. After 4 hours, all the broken figurines are safely bagged up and thrown out. I start taking apart the room. Old books and clothes go in cardboard boxes. The pillows and mattress come off the 4-poster bed, and I drape a plastic sheet over the frame. As I roll up the rug, my foot catches on something, and I fall face first to the floor. I look back to see a hole in the floorboards. I tug my foot out and peer into the hole, only to see a small wooden box. I pull it out and open it. Inside the box are pieces of slightly yellowed paper and an upside-down envelope. I flip it over. It's addressed to me. I sit back on my feet, shrug, and pull out the letter. Hello, my dear. If you're reading this letter, I am almost assuredly dead. I know that sounds cliche, but I can't think of any other reason for you to be in my home. I did leave the house to you, after all. I know you probably don't remember me very well, but I remember how caring and precocious you were as a child. Once I heard what happened to you and your little one, I knew you were the one I could trust with this. I've made something, and you need to take care of it. I've locked it down in the basement. Read these papers. Once you're done, take the key and go down. It won't harm you. Warmest regards, Eleanor Algard. Tears start soaking the paper. How dare she bring up... I tear my thoughts away from that. I need to move on already. I wipe up my eyes and grab one of the papers. It's covered in cramped writing and rudimentary pictures of what looks like a human. I toss it aside and fish through the box, pushing through the papers until my fingers hit cold metal. The key is heavy in my hand. I slide it into my pocket and grab a paper at random. It's a page torn from a dictionary, and one entry is underlined. Golem, a creature from Jewish folklore. It is a human-shaped being formed from clay that is animated by a rune on its forehead. Golems are best known for their unnatural strength. I throw that paper aside too and grab the next one, a slip of paper. I can't get enough clay, but porcelain should work. God knows I have enough lying around. The slip is tossed aside, and I read through every single paper. It's mainly diagrams and non sequitur ramblings, but it makes me anxious. The papers seem to say that she actually made a golem, and judging by how much porcelain was on the floor, it must be huge. I can't just let something like that live. I have to destroy it. I drive back to the store and buy a wooden baseball bat. A porcelain golem should break easily. The key burns in my pocket as I place the bat in the passenger seat. The drive home seems over too quickly. I grab the bat and walk to the linen closet. The key seems even heavier in my hand now. It clicks in the lock and the door opens with a whine. The key goes back in my pocket and I flip the switch, flooding the stairs in yellow light. I clutch my bat closer and go down the stairs. Calling the basement a pigsty would be an insult to pigs everywhere. Trash is strewn about and spiders have taken up residence in the corners and among the rafters. Off to the side is a pile of blankets and sheets. Porcelain is scattered everywhere, but the golem is nowhere to be seen. I start pushing the trash around with my bat, clearing a way around. I make it to the blankets and start prodding at them. Blankets fall off, the pile shrinking with each pass. Something grabs at one of the shifting blankets. I bring my bat back and prepare to swing as the blanket falls in spite of the creature's best efforts. A pale figure, the size of a child, gazes up at me as I loom over it, ready to strike. Its painted eyes seem to blink, then well up. It curls in on itself as it looks away, preparing for its end. The bat falls, clattering against the concrete floor. The little golem, it can't be anything else. It has the animating symbol on its forehead, looks up again. It lifts its arms with a near silent coo, and I wrap my arms around its skinny body. It freezes before pressing closer, like a child seeking comfort. The golem hides its face in the side of my neck. The two of us huddle in our embrace for a while. In a few minutes, I'm going to carry this little one upstairs, start planning some life changes. But for now, we're going to sit together. It's time to make some new memories.
Wow.
Before we go on to our next speaker, I wanted to ask you, Maya, what are your writing aspirations?
I just write for fun.
I can definitely see you publishing a series.
Okay.
Any other comments from anyone in the room before we move on to our last speaker?
That whole thing was like very, almost like you were hinting at it being creepy, but the part that got me was when you said Idaho being in the middle of nowhere. And it made me laugh because I grew up in the middle of nowhere in the Midwest, and just that entire sentence was very accurate.
I do have to say, I really enjoy how it started off as, oh, this can be creepy, to, oh, this zombie is not actually a bad creature. And if someone were to read your other works or listen to them like now, then to hear that, if you hadn't mentioned it was not going to be creepy, everyone would have been fearful of the worst and then had to be a complete plot twist.
It's
an interesting
feature because the golem typically is presented as like a kind of dark and scary creature, but in stories about them, they tend to be doing good things. So it's an interesting contrast.
Yeah, I like writing, dark and scary things, but I'm like, here's this thing, it's always been kind of considered dark and scary. What if I make it not?
Yeah.
And the description of the great-grandmother's house, it's actually based on my memories of my own great-grandmother's house. And she did try and teach me how to play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. She had a really old TV and a really old computer. And she was in the middle of nowhere in Idaho.
Yeah, there's so many layers to your writing, Maya. It really draws me in. There was a comment from one of the students in the room saying that she loves all of your pieces, that they submerge you into reading more, give readers a curiosity, which is endearing.
Thank you.
If you ever do say publish some stuff, I feel like you could put all your work together into like a factually correct version, procrastinate stories instead of like one universe connected story, just like a whole bunch of short stories that really connected in very linear way. Just about different people, about different monsters kind of thing. I feel like we could have good success with that if you wanted to.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I want to give the floor now to Allie Aldrick. We overlooked her in the schedule, and so I want to make sure she has time to read before we leave time for additional readings. Allie, are you ready?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can,
Yep.
We can see you.
Okay, good. So, yeah, I hadn't ever published anything before. And to be honest, when I first started taking creative writing I took both of mine with Rick Alley at the Chesapeake campus.
Okay.
But I didn't consider myself a writer at all. I just considered myself with painting and art in other forms, but not writing. And I didn't actually learn how to really read until the 5th grade because I had dyslexia. And I'm friendly, so everybody was like, oh, yep, she's a great student. She's doing good. So my mom helped me learn to read. And it's now very fun because I actually can use it in this way too and be artistic in other ways. So the first one that I wrote that was added to ChannelMarker was actually based off a painting, and I have the painting here. Did it work?
Screen share?
Yeah, I'm trying. Oh, there it goes.
Screen shares. Yeah, okay, you got it.
Awesome. So this is the painting that it was based off of. It wasn't the other way around. It wasn't written and then painted. But so this one's called Depart. I dream in the color of wild raspberry jam, drowning in the epics of the mighty, fields of emerald and goldenrod, awashed in fallen heroes. Death watches from the horizon as I search for fading hope. There is no good or evil here, only the dying. Hollowed out like bird bones, I strip myself bare, preparing for their stories, gorging on the broken promises, and the names of maidens waiting on ghosts. Offering a kiss and 2 coins, I am the blessed death, the path to Elysian. That was all of that one.
I love that.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
I can see how that was inspired by this, by the painting.
So I can't remember the name of the goddess anymore, but there is a Greek goddess that's supposed to be kind of like a pair with death, and she takes the heroes to the hero afterlife. And then I based her on that, and then this story off of that. So.
Did you submit any artwork to the ChannelMarker?
I didn't go to the Portsmouth campus, so I wasn't allowed to submit any of the artwork. Really? If I was, I would have submitted this with it.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, I'm glad you were able to share that.
Yeah. Actually, I gave it to Mr. Alley because he inspired me with the idea. Yeah, it's really small. It's only like the size of a hand, so it's really small. But he inspired me by showing me that you can write stories off of paintings and poems and things like that and be inspired by the outside world. And so it really helped me with my writing.
Be very symbiotic.
Your point when he said he had dyslexia with writing all that, it's not that he had dyslexia, it didn't have much experience with writing. It wasn't actually until high school that I realized you had to separate dialogue from main paragraphs. So honestly, it had it worse in that regard, but I got over it.
Allie, did you have another piece you wanted to share?
Someone has a question. Allie, someone has a question about that.
Oh.
Dominic says, it's amazing how you are able to give a still image such a lively voice. How do you imagine it speaking to you?
So for that particular one, I kind of, after I painted her, and a lot of times when I paint things, I think about kind of how they would feel or how they would think. And so I figured, like, with the wild raspberry jam, I was kind of the idea that she sees blood so much, she sees death so much that she doesn't see it in the way that we would see it. Like, she sees it in the way of, this is something that I see every day, and she doesn't relate it to horrible things because she's not doing something horrible. She's doing something good for these people. She's taking them to a better place.
Very
And that's why I kind of picked that language.
Thank you.
It's a very interesting.
Here. Wait, oh no, I thought Ricky. April, Professor Campbell is saying that Rick, Allie is a wonderful teacher, and always encouraging his students in creative writing.
It
looks like he hasn't been able to pop in, but we're going to, we have this recorded that we'll, and to share with him and to share with others who weren't able to be here.
So my next one, surprisingly also, was, it's almost like a story poem. Like, it's not written in the usual form you would assume a poem to be written in. It's just like a 2-paragraph kind of thing. And it was also based off a painting that he showed in class, and I can't remember the name of it right now, but it got in my head and I couldn't quit thinking about it. So this one is called Her Smile. And it goes, like every morning, the aged fishermen watched for them, the milling yawns, as they would make their way over the monstrous arch that connected the two cities. Sorry, my thing moved. Shadow puppets made with twisted fingers for a child's entertainment that would appear right before dawn broke against the horizon. But even from this distance, the gray man could always tell, the yawns never stopped to see the most wondrous sight the world had offered them. That moment when the sun would set fire to the sea bursting gold, the way oblivion would be torn into 1,000 hues that could never be named, but only lusted after by master artists. The ocean swirled in long-forgotten languages, singing praises with every strike against his salt-worn boat. Even the winds tasted different, as it was injected with the warmth of yellow his mother had taught him was the flavor of life. He had been alone so long now, with all his loves taking their plots in the cemetery one by one, that the sunrise was the only smile he saw anymore. He had become so attached to the glowing wonder of the morning that he'd begun calling it Juliet after his late wife. And with the troubling news he had gotten recently, he began waiting for her more urgently each day. Today was no different, as he went over the list in his head one last time. He counted the moments as he knotted his shoes together and checked the stones in the pockets of his heavy wool coat, 3 for each. Bronze slid over the knuckle of his calloused fingers as he fixed his gaze on the horizon. Everything was ready now, and he just waited for the blaze.
If I also have his class this semester. Is it the painting of the bridge? Okay, it's called the Whistler Battlesea Bridge, and I think the painting is called Nocturne Blue and Gold or something like that. I had to go back and find it, but as soon as you started describing it, I was like, oh, I know what she's talking about.
Yeah, it was that one.
The nocturnes are always so nice.
Well, I can say you're definitely a writer, Allie.
Thank you.
And I look forward to maybe seeing your artwork. I don't know if there are other forums. Are you guys meeting in like a writing group or artist circle?
Well, there is a creative writing club, but the creative writing club, that's been kind of going down on the decline in members lately.
The creative writing club, is that on the Chesapeake campus or Virginia Beach?
Yeah, on Chesapeake campus.
Okay.
You know, but perhaps like this is showing here that maybe this is a really good medium. That because you're not constrained by location or schedule, you know, because like for me, for the Creative Writing Club, it's just the time-wise I couldn't, but it really would be nice. This is a good forum for that.
This is good for me too. I can't make it to the Chesapeake campus or Virginia Beach campus. I'm in Norfolk, so online is basically the only one I can do because of timing.
Yeah, that was, I feel like, most people's problem. We were trying to actually get together and make something at one point in time, because I took both creative writing, so I couldn't take any more. And I was kind of sad. I had Maya in one, and I had Minerva another, and Dominic and Joey and all of them. So I kind of was hoping to do something, but it's so hard because there's 4 campuses and we're all so spread out.
Well, there is some good news on that front. I actually, since I'm on university, I got transferred over as the next president of the club. So using April Day, can try to come up with something to do online instead for the time frame.
Yeah, I think that would be very valuable to build community and to support each other in the process.
Yeah, the is a bit much, so I will try to take this into account and figure out something how to do online.
Yeah. I had one more piece in ChannelMarker. It's a little bit longer, if that's okay if I still read it.
Well, we're right at 1:30, but I think that we're all here for you. And so, yeah, go ahead and read.
Okay, so this one is a bit different than the other ones because it's a lot more personal and a little bit more difficult to read. But this was the creative essay kind of, or creative, honestly, a nonfiction creative short story pretty much kind of thing. So this one is called Dad. It's funny how I can remember feelings and strange details, like the place I hid to cry unseen behind a vending machine, the smell of dusty chairs in the chapel, the beeping pattern the machine made. But I can't remember who called me to tell me my dad was in the hospital. After the call, my sister Rachel arrived, worried etched in each inch of her body. We rode in ominous silence along the picturesque beach highway. The whole journey I felt like Persephone must have felt riding to meet death, anxiety rattling her bones, but a sense of strength welling up for the fight that was surely ahead. Rachel always had a deep-seated fear of hospitals, so the only real talking we did was me placating her anxieties, forever the dutiful older sister. We arrived at the hospital. Looming buildings of nondescript features leered down at us. Rachel and I clung to each other as we searched the maze for our father. We found him sedated in between sleep and wake, propped up in a chair. I found that detail so strange. Why, if you were putting someone to sleep, would you sit them in a chair? But I kept my inquiries to myself. I learned he was being his usual self, petulant and childish while going through withdrawals. The doctors had had enough of his tantrums and put him to bed. His wife Shirley sat near, watching something mind-numbing on TV. We made the necessary pleasantries, even though we were none too close. He had been there for days, and neither my father nor Shirley thought to call me. This made me wonder how often he was in the hospital, and never told me. I knew over the years he had found himself in rehab for the love of the drink, but I only knew it from outside information. Rachel once found a book in his ever-changing library that he kept housed in a china cabinet. It was The 7 Steps to Recovery. Inside the book cover was filled with scrawls of people wishing him luck and saying how much they respected him. I understood he was a completely different person when he was not sauced. I could even see what my mother had seen in him, the humor that would crinkle his eyes, the mischief, and his heart. When he was drinking, he was angry, dark and brooding. I could never quite figure out how alcohol always seduced him when she stole all that was good from him. Dad, it's your daughter here. I stroked his arm. I was not sure if it would even get through, but maybe if he felt my touch, he would dream it too. I hope you're feeling okay, Dad, Rachel said as she took the spot on the other side of the chair. He's been like that for a while. The doctor said he'll be like that for a bit, Shirley said, glancing over at us. Allie, Rachel, over there, look. Dad muttered in his medicated stupor, his eyelids fluttering in an effort to wake up. Oh, look, girls. He knows you're here. That's nice, Shirley smiled at us. Kissing Dad on the cheek, I turned to Shirley. We'll be back tomorrow. Please make sure he knows and that the doctors don't medicate him again. I'd like to be able to talk to him, so we can visit. Yeah, we'll be back first thing in the morning. Is that enough time, you think? If you need, Allie and I can stay with him some tomorrow while you go home for a bit, Rachel added, much sweeter than me. Yeah, okay. It might be nice to go home for a bit, but I don't like to leave him alone, Shirley replied. I figured tomorrow when we came back, she would find an excuse not to leave us alone with Dad. Visiting hours were coming to an end, and so we left. This time, the ride wasn't silent like before. This time, I was angry. How could you do this again? In what way do you think it's okay to be sick and not tell your children? In my heart, I knew that was just him. He was always playing pretend, obsessed with juvenile games. He would play hide and seek when he was on a bender, dressed up when he was caught, donning his best sober costume, and sleight of hand when he was trying to secretly drink in front of me. Do you really think I thought it was just sweet tea in your glass? That I couldn't smell there wasn't the only amber liquid in the mix? But I wasn't any better. I played right along. I would ignore him outright, feeling like I was the grown-up, when it was just as immature. I never told him why I ignored him, never getting to the root of our problem. I just did it because I could. I tried to keep my tongue quiet, but the little bouts of anger kept sliding out. Who the fuck does he think he is? He's driving me insane, Rachel. Maybe my hand slammed the rim of the steering wheel as Rachel turned her head from me, trying but failing to conceal her tears. This is ridiculous, as usual. Can't he just be normal for once? Rachel just kept her head turned from me. I knew she didn't really want to hear it anyways. She always wanted his approval and his attention. She was the dutiful daughter. It was as if somehow his genes connected her more to him than they ever did me. I was the one who revolted against the idea that because he had a contribution to creating me, that I owed him anything. I wanted him to be the adult, to take responsibility, even after I was an adult. Most of all, I wanted a sorry, and I was going to wait cross-armed until I got it. My silly ringtone chirped, and the noise that usually meant no harm made my stomach sink. My fingers sat on the button for a moment. Maybe this doesn't mean anything. This has to be a coincidence. Answer, Allie, it's nothing. A disembodied voice on the other side of the phone did not settle my stomach. Allie, I don't know how to say this. Your dad, he died. But don't worry, he's fine. He's fine. The doctors resuscitated him. But he's in a coma, and you're gonna need to go get some stuff and head back to the hospital now, Allie. Are you okay? Yeah, we just pulled up to my house. We'll grab some stuff and head back, I muttered, stunned. Rachel stared at me in a state of shock. She was barely holding it together. My heart began to race, and the world tunneled around me. I feel sick at my anger only seconds ago. The power I felt in calling him out was lost. I was no longer triumphant heroine of my tale. I was the ugly beast that needed to be slain. We quickly grabbed what we needed and rushed back to the car. This time the world lay dark around us. The water of the beach beside us was inky black, no longer picturesque. Instead, it looked like the shores of Lethe, the river of oblivion. Pulling up, the muted hospital window sneered down at us. Unconsciously, I rubbed my palms hard against my pants, trying to wipe away the clammy sweat. Allie, what do we do? How will we find him? What if they're not going to let us up? Rachel spurted out her onslaught at me as her dark amber eyes squinted with stress. My sister was never good with the heavy emotions, always finding it safest to attack when she felt upset. Her hands kept ringing and unringing as she stood there waiting for my magical answer that would fix everything. Rachel, one step at a time. There'll be someone somewhere that I can ask for directions. Everything will be fine. The words everything will be fine, okay, or everything will be okay sounded hollow even to my own ears. Repeating them as a mantra in the car had stolen their meaning. Stepping through the automatic doors, I shivered in a sudden rush of cold, stuffy air that ruffled my hair. The gentle gesture, as if to calm a child, like the hospital was saying, "It's okay, sport." Personally, I never liked hospital. It always felt like death was licking his lips and ghosts were etched in the walls. How many people walked these halls thinking that everything was okay? How many silent pleas were chanted over and over? Lord, I will give anything. It falls off the tongue nicely when you're backed in a corner. I followed the scent of bleach and the noise of nurses in search of the maze for my father. Paying the ferryman a toll of my name, he pushed the button that would lead me to my father. There he was, but not, as if somehow he'd been replaced with a poor photocopy of himself. His skin was pale and drained of blood in place of his cancerous blonde that he was so proud of, and his hair, that was always sun-kissed blonde, only peppered with gray, seemed limped and aged. Machines were stacked around him, faking life, playing the slow rhythm of his heartbeat as if it was theirs. I'd never seen him this way. The parlor of his skin was not the only thing the hospital had stolen. Laying my head on his chest, I could tell this wasn't fully him. He smelled like antiseptic and rubber, not his usual scent of alcoholic sweat, salt from sunning, and marble reds. I kissed his cheek and rested my forehead against his face. My nose was flat against his skin. The nose he always boasted was his. As a child, I hated hearing that. Why would I want the nose of a grown man? I was so afraid it would steal away the beauty I had planned for adult Allie. "Hi, Dad. It's Allie. I'm here. Don't worry. Please be okay. I love you," I hopefully whispered in his ears. I only left for a second to get something, and when I came back, he was blue. I don't know. It all happened so fast, and they were in here trying to resuscitate him. Shirley spilled out before I could even ask. Her fake red hair is limp and lifeless as my father's told me she had been stress sweating. I could see she was scared and clinging to me even though she usually didn't have much to do with me. She needed me to be strong for her too. Visiting hours ended before I knew it, and Rachel and I moved to the ICU lobby. We busied ourselves setting up camp in a booth. It was like being kids again, building a fort, hiding from the boogeyman. As if we did a good enough job, nothing could get us in the night. As doctors walked the hallways, they kept looking at us, giving us sad head nods like the battle was already over. They knew what happened to kids hiding in the lobby. Boogeyman always found them. There was no sleeping. My mind kept racing. What was our last conversation? Did he know how much I loved him? Did he want to tell me that back? Would he clean up his act when he got better, if he got better? So rather than close my eyes, I watched reruns of Buffy the Vampire Slayer on the lobby TV. "He's going to be okay, right? He has to be," Rachel spoke over the epically bad fight scene. Looking at her disheveled red hair and pleading face, I plastered the best big sister smile on. "Of course, he's a fighter. We'll just have to wait for the test. They'll tell us. It's a one-step-at-a-time thing." She turned away from me, curling up again on herself and pretending to try to sleep. We both knew that wasn't going to happen. The morning rays broke through the window, rousing me from resting my eyes. "I have to stretch my legs. I'll be right back," I lied. I really wanted a moment alone. Down the hall was a dark room labeled as a place for prayer. All the lights in the quaint room were off except for one spotlight on a table where visitors could write prayers to place in the box. The box looked plain, and as I caressed its worn edges, it didn't feel special enough to hold all the wishes I knew had been placed inside. "Hi, God, I need a favor, and I know it's not simple, but are they ever? I need you to help. I can't do this. I'm not ready to lose him. Please, 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 I will trade anything I can. You can even have some of my time. Just make him okay. I'll take it from there. I will not ignore him anymore, and I will take what I can get. Please let me fix this. Let me tell him I love him one last time." Tears stung my eyes as I crumbled into one of the gray tweed chairs. Knowing I could only stay so long before someone came to find me, I wiped my cheek with the back of my hand. Rising to go, I took one more deep breath before I went back to reality. The doctors kept telling us one more test. It was too soon to tell. You know, with brain injuries, it takes a few days. Rachel and I spent as much time as we could in the chair by his bed, holding his hand and telling stories. Remember that time he argued with me over my own eye color? I giggled at Rachel. Yeah, he could fight about anything. It's a special skill to be that argumentative. Rachel nodded her head in agreement. Soon Rachel and I were doubled over in laughter at his annoying habits and bad stories from our childhood. The nurses had to come in and tell us we were too loud, reminding us that we were in the ICU, a place where people were dying in silence. How long did they listen to our stories before getting the nerve to tell us to stop? Did they know our laughter was out of sadness, a fake it till you make it technique I used all my life? I couldn't be all bad if I had a smile on my face and if the tears were from laughter, not sorrow. On day 2, we found the first real taste of hope. Dad was blinking and he squeezed my hand. He wasn't talking, but his eyes were open, and that meant it would be okay. Or at least that's what I kept telling myself. Even the nurses told me it was a good sign, his eyes darting around the room like he was looking at something. And he would cry. Though they told me that was just because his eyes were dry, I took it to mean he could hear me even if he couldn't respond. We were zombies after the days of sitting in my dad's bed in the state of unknowing. Random outbursts of crying would turn to laughter to hide the pain. We had all started to go a little mad. Our eyes ringed with baggy blue hues and our bodies were gaunt with stress. Finally, the results were in. A group of us followed the doctors into a conference room to discuss my father's test. Well, I'm sad to tell you the results are not good, the doctor said matter-of-factly. The part of the brain that made Bob who he was died during the incident. My body stiffened and I looked into the doctor's eyes, my own starting to leak. But he squeezed my hand and he is blinking, I whined out, as if the tests were wrong. Yes, the portion of Bob's brain that controls the motion functions of his body survived. He is responding how it would normally. It's a bit rare, but it happens. I stopped really listening to the doctor. The words started to darken around the edges. Halting time for a moment. How could he be alive but not him? Have I been talking to an empty shell? Could he hear me? Wait, what are we going to do? Is he a vegetable? Dad did always like his veggies. Fuck. Rachel's hand curled in mine, shocking me back from myself. I tried to review what the doctors had been saying in my head. Dad was dead, he was gone. And even if he ever woke up again, he would be nothing but an empty husk. As a family, we collectively decided we would let him go. We would have to take him off life support. Before that happened, we would all get a little more time with his shell because apparently death can be scheduled, much like any other hospital appointment. My dad's number was up and he arrived, and I was hiding beside a vending machine. Pressed against the wall, hyperventilating. Everything was over. There was nothing I could do, nothing I could trade. Either there was no God or God picked a sick way of teaching me a lesson. I have to be strong. I know that's what you would want. Did you even believe in God? Will I see you in an afterlife if you didn't? I couldn't hide forever, so I took a deep breath and counted to 10, walking back to the lobby to wait for my father's appointment with death. It's quite disturbing knowing the minute that your father was going to be unplugged. Standing at the end of his bed was a clergyman in robes, reading him his last rites. He laid there looking sick but alive. His eyes met mine blankly, then flickered to the window. If you girls want, you can say this prayer over him. I know you may not be Catholic, but I think it still counts, he offered to my sister and me. I walked up first, brushing my hand against his cheek as I scanned every inch of his face, trying to drink in the details. I didn't want to forget. And even though he was bloated from organ failure, it still felt like my last chance to capture it. Leaning forward, I kissed his forehead and both his cheeks. I hope you can hear me, even if you're not in this body. I'm sorry I wasn't better. Thank you for fighting. I'm not mad. I understand you can say, and I hope to see you again one day. I love you, Daddy. With one last squeeze of his hand and a kiss on his cheek, I walked away, leaving the room and my father behind. And that's it.
Thank you, Allie.
Thank you guys for listening. I know it went over.
No,
That was beautiful.
it's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Also, I have a question. They mentioned at one point it mentioned Natty, and there was just a true story about you with your dad or whatnot.
Yes, this is the nonfiction story of my dad's last few days.
It was very
Beautifully
written, very well processed.
Okay, well, it
I know
sounds like
that
it was it's just a few days, but it sounds like you had a good time with him.
Yeah.
I know that it was a long story, but it didn't feel like a long story. I was engaged every word.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, allowing that. And my heart is touched.
Professor Allie actually shared the first part of that in his other classes. So when you started reading, I realized that. And I'm so pleased to hear the rest of that story, especially being read by the author.
Thank you. I couldn't get through it in class. I tried to read it in class because I did wrote it in my first English class, and then I revisited it for his in creative writing when he went over nonfiction creative writing. And I was happy. It's very cathartic to write it, and it's been many years now. So, but it's still hard whenever you read it.
Oh, sorry.
No, go on, Dominic.
I had lost my grandmother back in 2018, and it was very difficult. And being as it is 2 years later, I'm still trying to get over it. But that really was parallel to what I was going through, and a lot of the wording you put, how you said the words were getting darker around the edges. That one line, I don't know why that stuck out to me so much, but it really did hit home with that. And it just, you knew how to express yourself in a fashion that anybody can relate. Like, whether they have a deceased relative or not. And it's really cool how you were able to fully and capture that feeling of isolation and and confusion and all like the basic aspects of that avenue. And I really enjoyed hearing that. But I can completely understand why it was hard to write that, because I could tell by listening to you it was getting pretty, intense. So thank you very much for writing that. That took a lot of willpower to do, and that was really cool of you to do.
Yep. In my case, I was thankful all for my grandparents, but that means I also had to watch both my since my grandparents actually died, which made it even worse. But you just know all of them.
Allie, also, it's interesting because we have two pieces that relate to each other. So yeah, and I've written a piece later on about my mother's death, which took me a while to be able to read it because I would always cry at the end. Artistically, I think there's an interesting question you pose as to whether or not the prayer was answered. And I think that could be a full debate, because possibly it was. You see, that's one of those artistic, spiritual questions that you juxtapose is, when is death really? Was it when, if he's still doing that, is he alive? Is he not alive? And did I get extra time? Because I did get to sit with him and tell the stories. And there's this whole thing going on there with the reader that takes it into there's the sadness of the story itself, but there's a much greater thing that you bring in. When is life? Who gets to decide when we die and when we live? When does it end? Will I see you again? And I love that you brought in that whole question of life and death, just like I did in the nature. It all sits side by side. It does. And are there really lines of demarcation? And it was like, in a way, you witness his death over and over and over and over and over again, right? But you witnessed his life over and over and over and over and over again. And that artistically is what I love about the piece, is that you bring that greater question into perspective.
Yeah, and your comment about apparently you can schedule death was almost sarcastic.
Yeah, that kind of felt like a lot of things are so strange about the hospital, and kind of like what Dominic said is like, everybody has something. If you've experienced death, if you've experienced loss, that it's so relatable between each person. Like, and that's kind of what I was trying to put in there, was like those things that relate me to other people in a way. You know, I knew there were other people in the ICU fighting for their lives, and I'm over here laughing, and you know, somebody else is crying, and it's just so strange having all those experiences and how we're all connected with those experiences too.
It's weird when you have a day that's either particularly good or particularly bad, and you think to yourself, to someone else, this is the best day in the world. To someone else, this is the worst day in the world. It's the same day.
Yes.
Well, are there any final remarks before we close the room? I want to thank you all for your time and for your willingness to be with us today, for sharing your personal self-expression. Congratulations again for being published in the ChannelMarker. I see you continuing to develop your work and encouraging others to express themselves and heal and connect in the process.